And welcome back to JKLIVE. What an interesting conversation we're having, both on camera and behind the camera. Go on, David D. You were saying?
You want a crisis.
Why?
And then you talk during the crisis. Crises are very good for economic reform. People don't do reform before crisis.
So you're saying a crisis was created?
No. It was actually whether we would do
Saitabo, you can come.
so Mukate. And I said no, because if they win, I expect the economy to go belly up in 12 to 18 months, Max.
It's a very nasty thing to say.
No.
I thought
true.
David loved
Terrible thing to say.
I have told you guys, if Raila wins, expect a 200 shilling dollar by Christmas.
That's what you said.
Yes, many times.
Saitabo, you're going to sit there and take that?
No, Jeff, I think, let me begin by saying, Dr. Ndi started talking as a scholar, but he has quickly disintegrated and degenerated into a politician. He began by saying, let's go back to the numbers. So these pollsters, these are the same pollsters who are projecting William Ruto to be way ahead last year, early this year. And these guys were happy with it. It was Infotrack, it was Ipsos, it was Tifa. These guys never complained that, you're taking, I don't know, what samples. We didn't hear that. Now that they're behind, it's a different story. But coming back to the issue of, Raila winning and them waiting it out, well, we will live to see it because he's winning and they have to wait it out.
Jeff, women are never allowed to speak. Finish. Me, I will have to finish. Because David,
yes.
Today, I have to show you and prove to you that your wife, when they are friends, because we are both intelligent women. His wife and I are workout fanatics and good friends. So you talked about universe. I think we're now agreed that the universe that we use is voter register. The second thing is that we do stratified sampling using that register from the ward upwards up to the county. That's how we build it up to the 47 counties and then to the 9 regions. The third thing, David, which yes, we do not do at this point, and we give that disclaimer, but if you look at our latest poll, we have actually done an estimation, an Infotrack estimation on voter turnout. And we looked at every single constituency and county that we covered and estimated based on previous elections what the turnout would be. Last election, the first election of 2017, the turnout was 78%. The past election was also just around that figure, and it was high, under 80%. We are thinking that because of the stakes in this particular election, where we have all the luminaries running around, the election will also have very high voter turnout and will probably be at the levels of between 78 and 75, I actually put there, and he's right, between 75 and 80%. The regions that will have highest voter turnout will be the regions that have the highest to gain. So that is really the base of Raila Odinga, Nyanza, where we believe the voter turnout will be between 80 and 85. It will probably be man for man in Luo Nyanza, because I think anybody in Luo Nyanza who doesn't vote will be whipped. Flogged.
Literally.
Yes. They will not survive that night if their thumbs are not. And then the same thing will happen in Uasin-Gishu, in Elgeyo Marakwet, in Nandi, in Baringo, in Bomet, in Kericho, and also in
She said Baringo.
In Baringo, I've said. Yeah. So all the Kalenjin areas, I'm not too sure it will be the same in West Pokot. It may be lower in West Pokot. So we were looking at those factors. And then what we felt is that for this particular election, perhaps central Kenya is sitting and thinking, or mountain region is sitting and thinking, interesting. We don't have the main seat. We have the number 2 seat on either side. What do we do? will it be as good for us as it's always been? And therefore, whilst the voter turnout has always been around 83, 85%, maybe this time round we thought it would be about between 75 and 78%.
Correct.
I don't know. Maybe something will happen in the next 3 days and they'll say we're going out.
Who does a higher voter turnout favor?
It depends on where.
Yes.
It favors the person whose stronghold it is.
Okay, let's say central.
So it will favor Ruto because it
Yes.
is stronghold.
Correct.
But the thing about polls now is they always require context. You know, and that is the thing which probably is more useful for people. Because we get in the science of it, polling. The point I was making about, which I just make that up, about what we are not able to do logistically today, there's a way we do it, which is different, is actually, yes, you're using that sampling frame, but are you able to completely randomize? And that's why I pointed out, when you look at the demographics and you see some imbalances, you can say it's not possible to completely randomize. One of the reasons you are not able to completely randomize is the thing you just mentioned, which you call screening. Because screening actually begins to undo your randomization. But that's, I don't want to say that it's a major whatever, but these are limitations. That's what I say, these are limitations of the research. But the more important thing I think at this point is to say, you have Paul saying that Raila is ahead. You have Paul saying that Ruto is ahead. The Kenyans must be asking themselves, if these pollsters are using the same science, how can they be arriving at such different conclusions? I think that's the question that people probably have at the top of their mind. And to do that, you then, any data, any research, you have to interrogate it with a theory. And for elections, the best theory to use is voting behavior based on history. So you have to say, we know that if you look at even the US, they'll say blue states, red states, right. What's happening, and swing states. So where is movement happening? So if we are, then you analyze the polls using that kind of framework. And if you look at where we are, we have to say, okay, then you say, what is Raila's path to victory? Based on this, and what is Ruto's path to victory, and how do these polls square up with those paths to victory? So we know, for example, if you look at 2013 and 2017, Raila had 4 strongholds with about whatever, and Ruto has 2 strongholds. Would have 2 strongholds. Ruto had 2 strongholds. Now, if you look at the registered voters now, roughly, those numbers of Raila are 8 million votes. Ruto's numbers are 8 million votes today. And then you have, that's 16. And then you have another 6, which are now battlegrounds. So the question you've got to ask is the following. According to Raila and their campaign, they say the way their path to victory is to retain his strongholds and gain at least 30% in Mount Kenya.
Right.
Okay? Now, Ruto's path to victory was to defend his strongholds, which is Rift Valley and Mount Kenya, and gained. Actually, he didn't have to, because if he defended strongly, but because he's not the stronger of the Mount Kenya, if he lost ground in Mount Kenya, he needed to gain ground from Raila's strongholds. Now, we then have to look at the polls, who has done what, and ask whether the polls are telling us that story. Now, we know that Raila has lost ground on the 3 strongholds, which are not Luo Nyanza. He has lost ground in Western. He has lost ground in Ukambani because they didn't choose Kalonzo. And he has lost ground in the coast. He has not reached...
Where is the evidence for that?
In your polls. All the polls show, the same polls that we are talking about, show that he has lost ground in those 3 places. He has also not reached the 30% stronghold, the threshold. So the question is, how is he ahead if he has lost ground and he has not offset what he has lost in Mount Kenya? In fact, if you do the math, you see that in both 2013 and 2017, he lost by about 7%. The gap between Uhuru and Raila was about 7 percentage points in the national election. Now, so the ground he has lost in those three strongholds is about 10 percentage points of the national vote. So for him to be ahead, he would need to gain from Mount Kenya about 17% of the national vote. Now, 17% of the national vote, if we work with 22 million voters, is in the order of 3 million votes. Now, 3 million votes in Mount Kenya out of 4.7 million votes is over 60%. So to close what he has lost and to close the gap he had before, he would need to win at least half of Mount Kenya. Has he? So that's the way you interrogate the polls.
But
Hold on, Saitaba.
Yeah, well, you know, as long as we're talking about numbers and
Can Baba win 60?
And the science of polls, you know, Jeff, I think I want us to get to the politics of the polls. What is the politics behind the polls? And this is, you know, this is one of the things that, you know, I've been saying. If William Ruto is still behind in the polls, after all he has done, after all the investment that he has made in the last 3-4 years, you know, what does that say about his candidature? What does that say about his candidature? What it says is that Kenyans are finding it very hard to buy him. He's finding it very hard to sell himself to Kenyans. And Doc here said that some polls are saying, you know, William Ruto is ahead. Some are saying Raila Odinga is ahead. But the important thing is, what is the credibility of the polls that are saying whatever they're saying? Because we have, even in the media, we have mainstream media and we have gutter press. So if the gutter pollsters are saying one of the parties is ahead, you know, what is their credibility? You know, the mainstream pollsters, all of them are unanimous. You know, Raila Odinga is ahead. And he's not ahead by a margin of error advantage. He's ahead by 9 points, if you factor in the margin of error. So I think, you know, when you look at what the polls are actually saying, they're saying that William Ruto has found it very hard to sell himself to the Kenyan people.
David, did you believe the Ipsos InfoTrack polls that say that Raila was ahead? Did you believe that?
Let me not talk about a particular poll. Let me talk about what I observe in the polls when I read them, because I read details. For example, let's interrogate, has Raila, we say, has that question about context and interrogating numbers. You interrogate number with a background, not with beliefs or what you want to hear. So I want to ask, when I look at the polls, I ask him, has Ruto gained in Raila strongholds in the polls? And the answer is yes. Because in Ukambani, Raila had 83% plus in both elections, 2023 2017. Does he have 80s? No, he has about 60 from the polls. So he's lost ground.
Jeff, you must allow us as pollsters as well to get an opportunity to put in a word or two.
You will.
Otherwise, it will be very unfair if David is going to insinuate and we will sit here like flower girls.
No.
We're not flower girls.
No, I'm interpreting.
So, no, but David, you have already done so. So please give us an opportunity.
You will get a chance.
So we're not flower girls.
We are the people who are responding.
Yes.
Because we are in the campaigns. So what are the polls telling us as the people in the campaign? That we have gained ground in Western, in Raila stronghold, we have gained ground in Ukambani, we have gained ground in the coast, and Raila has not climbed the mountain. Now, when we look at why is he ahead, then we look at the numbers. Then we realize there's some funny things happening with undecideds. But that's beside that. Let me give you an example. I just looked at 3 polls. The latest TIFA, the latest of our polls, and InfoTrack. In the Mount Kenya region, the gap between them, some of them, is 10 percentage points. So I think TIFA is 19, theirs is 24, and theirs has divided into 2. It has divided into East and West. One is 14, one is 24.
No, so Mount Kenya total is 21.
Yeah. So when you weight, I was saying, when you weight, you get 21. So you got 19, 21, 24, and if you track, because I've been tracking all of them over time, the Raila number in Mount Kenya is all over the place. But what you cannot say is that none of them is 30%. And they know that that's the 30% the threshold they set for themselves. But it's actually not adequate because he has to overcome the deficit of 7% of the national vote and then gain what he has lost. Because that was based on the assumption that he doesn't lose anything. So 7 plus what he has lost is of 15% of the national vote. Then you ask, if he doesn't have that, how has he gotten ahead? That's a question I want to hear.
Go on, Samuel. You go first before Angela jumps down by neck. By the way, we've got some breaking news right now from the Commonwealth Games. Ferdinand Omanyala, gold, 100
Oh,
meters.
wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah,
Great.
10 in a time of 10:02. Wow.
Same as the hits.
Exactly.
So he just needed to get there in good time, rest,
Absolutely.
Get some
have his
rest.
visa,
Yes.
Absolutely.
And run.
win.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Go on. Sorry to
See,
interrupt.
this analysis, of course, what David is saying and the way he's analyzing this and the way we're analyzing this, there's a total difference in the way he's looking at them and the way we look at our numbers. So, for example, so Raila has gained 21% in central Kenya, okay? But what is the number that Ruto has gained in western? Is that where he desired? Is that where he wanted to be? The number that Ruto has gained in cost, for example, in cost here, Ruto is 30%, for example. Raila is 50%. Of course, there's an 11% number that has not yet, is still unclassified, as undecided. So when you look at this region to region, then the numbers make sense. So you cannot look at just one region, but the most important thing is to know that there are strongholds of these candidates. And the most important thing also is that the die-hard supporters of these candidates have not changed. The die-hard, that constituency called Raila strongholds, they have not changed. Those people will always be there. But remember...
So you're saying he hasn't lost ground in
Remember, between the last election and right now, anybody who was 15 years is voting right now. We have an extra, over 3 million. That is people who were not registered in the last election and they are coming in right now to join a constituency that already existed of people called Raila supporters and also people called Ruto supporters, diehards. That kind of remains stable. I think the bigger challenge is how now the undecided vote kind of gets split at the end of the day.
Saitaba already told us where the undecideds are going, but Angela, Angela, you go ahead.
They're all in blue.
Let me read the numbers.
Go on.
Let me read you the numbers. David, you have gained between July and August from a candidate who hitherto has not run as a presidential candidate. So you have no benchmark to compare with. That's point number one. You have a candidate who has never run for presidency. So you can't compare him with anything. But having said that, if you compare his performance in July, which was 37%, I think, by the pollsters who are credible, between 37, 38, 39, you have gained 5 points. Where have your gains been? You've gained in Mount Kenya 11 points. So you've moved from 55% in July to 66% in August, this week, which is a good thing. That's your stronghold. You've also gained in South Rift 8 points, another one of your strongholds, which is now at 62%. You've also gained in Nairobi, probably because you went for the debate, I don't know. But you have moved from 30 to 37%, okay? Elsewhere, your gains have been minimal, but you've gained. Why are you gaining? Because as Jeff started out by saying, the undecided has reduced. Because as you edge closer to the election, people make up their minds. But as Samuel is also saying, we have to look at these numbers in terms of their relative absolute voter numbers. So when we talk about percentages in Mount Kenya, we're talking about 24% for Raila, but it's 24% of 4.7 million. which will be higher than perhaps what he has as his percentage in northern Kenya, for instance, or northeastern Kenya. Where has Raila in himself gained? He's gained significantly in lower eastern, so he has 71% now in lower eastern. But at the coast, even in that last election, he didn't get 70%. I think he
had 70.
He had 65% in total at the coast. Please check. And right now he has 58. Probably they will work towards getting to a higher figure because the undecided, I think, is 7%. But he's gained 9 points at the coast, which is his stronghold. He's gained 17 points in lower eastern. He has maintained in Mount Kenya at 24%. He was at 24 in July, he's at 24 now. He has, which should interest you, he has 30% of the support in North Rift, which is the melting pot for William Ruto. It is not the flip that you see in Nyanza. In Nyanza, William Ruto has 14% support currently, and Raila has 79%. Now, where the undecided is stemming from is in Nyamira, and it is in Kisii. In Luo Nyanza, like I said to you, if you don't vote, I don't know. They will vote, I think.
Don't show up to work.
And then, like was rightfully mentioned, even the last time when you were in that team, Nairobi voted towards Raila. So we now see that he has 53, he's gained 4 points, but so has Ruto gained, as I was saying to you. So if you look at the numbers based on what the voter is telling us, because that's all we go by, at this point, then indeed the 49% that we have stated becomes the indication of what the voter would do if it were today. Now, let me add this, that what David is actually talking about, which is simulating numbers, we don't share with the public. That is what campaign teams do. That is what we do in our back rooms. So our self-respecting pollster today will tell you, without the cameras, how they're calling the election. We talked about it yesterday with Samuel. Why? Because we look at elections, previous elections, maybe, 5, 6 elections past. So if you ask me, when the cameras go off, Jeff, I will tell you how I'm calling this election, because I've done just that. The reason why we don't do it in front of camera is because our responsibility as at now is to tell you that which the respondent, who is the voter, has told us. Not for us to actually guesstimate, because that's what we'll be doing, making educated guesses based on what we are seeing as historical trend and the current things that we see when we go out into the field.
Okay, David, would you tell me on air? Will William Ruto win this election?
Listen, we're here to ask, to interrogate polls.
Yes.
That's the way, if polls are saying some are going this way and some are going that way, what can a sort of interested reader who doesn't probably understand what went on in the kitchen of the poll, and as I said, polls are weaknesses. What are the weaknesses of these polls? You look for coherence. Are they telling a coherent story? Now, and the story you're saying is, that's why you say, what are the way what she's saying is that not actually what they may want to do, but if you watch analysis of polls in other elections like the US, they will go state by state, blue state, whatever state, which one is likely to go this way, that way, what different polls, which team has a momentum, all sorts of things. And that's what we should be doing. And I say, if I am asking the people, say, what's the mental map? What's the mental map of this election you want to have? You want to have a mental map of saying, what has happened in Raila's strongholds? What has happened in Ruto's strongholds? Where are they headed? And you're saying, what is each of the candidates' path to victory? Let's be very clear. Raila's path to victory is to maintain his strongholds and gain in Mount Kenya. Gain the 7% that he has lost to it in 2 elections. And then, because he has also lost ground, gain the ground he has lost. So he needs at least 15% of the national vote gain in Mount Kenya. Okay?
Yeah.
Does he have it? None of the pollsters shows that he has a 15% gain. So how does he leapfrog his baseline? I'm not talking about leapfrogging Ruto. How does he leapfrog his baseline from 43%, yeah, with having lost in his strongholds and not made up in Mount Kenya?
David,
That is the question.
Just very briefly,
Have to answer.
Go on.
because just very briefly, listening to Doc, he's making it sound like Raila is running against Raila.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
I think no, he's not.
In a poll analysis.
No.
No, let me clarify. We are analyzing polls.
No.
Raila is running
Against
against
Raila.
his baseline. So it's that is the map.
So you haven't heard.
The
You haven't
numbers,
heard.
No. In numbers.
I'm happy he has confirmed.
In numbers, you're saying his strongholds, where he was getting 85
But
in
can you
Western.
tell us-
Let me finish.
Okay.
He was giving 85% in Western, 80% in Ukambani, 70% almost 65% in the coast, 90 in Luo Nyanza, were giving him 43. Okay? In 2 elections. How has he moved from 43 to 50 or 49, the numbers they are giving him? How has he gained 7 percentage points while he has lost ground in those 3 places and he has not gained the numbers required in the mountain to make up that loss?
Say it about.
But Doc,
That's
yeah.
arithmetic. We are not talking about election.
It's math.
What arithmetic has moved Raila to where he is? If the arithmetic does not add up, then you go back to the polls and ask, is it a sampling problem? Is it a type 2 error where people are not telling the truth? Is it the kind of randomization thing I'm talking about?
David,
why are the polls telling different stories?
David,
Say
do you
it about
agree
what's
that the percentages add up to 100? All the percentages that you've seen in all the polls add up to 100, correct? You also agree that all these polls have and acknowledge that there is a constituent called the undecided.
It's very small now. It's 9%.
It is 6%.
But you are not, none of you is answering the question. Given Raila's baseline,
Right.
where, and you are not contesting that he has lost ground. You have just enumerated his lost ground.
Jeff, I have to budge now.
You
I
have
have to
to
budge.
budge.
I have to budge.
Budget.
that
Yeah.
he has
Let him
not
try
been
and
in
answer.
mountain.
Let's say it about try and answer.
Yeah. Doc is comparing Raila's numbers to previous numbers. Raila Odinga is running against William Ruto, he's running against Wajakoya, he's running against Wahiga Mauri, all right? And David is here, just looking at one candidate, as if he's running against himself. He is not even mentioned his own candidate.
No, I'm looking at a set of polls.
No. I mean, let's not run away from... No, Daktari,
I'm looking at a
please.
set of polls.
Daktari, stop being overly scholarly.
Isn't it?
Yeah? No.
Are we analyzing candidates
Yes.
or polls?
I mean, polls.
I'm interrogating what the polls
looking at the numbers.
are
1 minute.
saying.
Looking at the numbers.
1 minute.
I'm not talking about Raila.
And Doc,
I'm talking about the
Doc
polls.
will not let me
No, but
finish
Go on. Finish.
because what I'm saying is his Waterloo. It takes his points right down the drain. Because if you're interrogating numbers, these numbers relate to people. These numbers are not independent numbers hanging in the air, right? So Raila Odinga is 7 percentage points ahead of William Ruto, okay? So if he's 7 percentage points ahead of William Ruto, and Daktari is very busy telling us, how in central Kenya he has not gained ground, how he has lost ground in western Kenya, and how, but he's still, bottom line, at the end of the day, what will matter is the final declaration. The final declaration of the pollsters is he's 7 points ahead. Daktari is not looking at the bottom line. He wants to get into the back room.
The polls,
He's going to his old job. He's going to his old job.
But
Daktari is going to his old job as a
Maybe it's
pollster.
get bottom up.
When
Okay, Samuel hasn't said a word in a while. Let me go to Samuel.
You see,
Yes.
even the Supreme Court did not know who won the election. That baseline.
Yes.
The lack of worry in Daktari is worrying me.
we appealed the election on process, not on result.
So the servers were never opened.
But we appealed on
don't-
process.
That 43%, that 43% is a number that cannot be verified, doesn't exist, cannot be verified up to today. We cannot use that as a baseline.
But Simon, I think Samuel, I think the other thing is we are comparing Central, where in the previous election we had a candidate who was mountain, who came from the mountain. Okay? Now we have two candidates who are not from the mountain trying to woo the mountain. Both of them have their number twos as people from the mountain. So we're not comparing David like with like. But what I see from David is what he and other teachers in the university taught us when we were doing statistics. If it becomes difficult, first you try and convince. If you can't convince, which he has not convinced me with his argument, then you confuse. He has also not been able to confuse me with what the numbers are saying. The numbers are very clear. Now what David must do is consult us. There are 3 C's. You do what? You convince. If you can't convince, you do what?
You confuse.
You confuse. If you can't confuse, you do what? You consult. Sasa let us consult.
You know, there's a question
and
that the
agree on
pollsters are not
numbers.
answering.
Go on.
Have the gain, either in percentage or in absolute numbers, that Raila has made in Mount Kenya, what you're calling climbing the mountain, sufficient to close the gap from previous elections and
Against
to offset.
who? Against who, Doc?
No. Purely,
Previous elections
They
were
are
not against
people.
William. He has
They are not
never run
people.
against
Listen,
William Ruto and
these
Rigathi
are not
Gachagua.
people, they are numbers.
He has never run against those two.
These are not people. If somebody in Alaska who didn't know Raila and I just give them the numbers to run on a computer and you take out the personalities, take out the personalities. You're saying you have these numbers in country X with this sort of baseline for candidate A and B. And then candidate B, this is where they were. And this is what they need to do to win. Saying they need to close that gap and they need to make up what they are losing in the areas. All the polls show that he has lost ground. And all the polls show that the gain he has made in Mount Kenya is modest. The question is, how do they then arrive at the conclusion that he is way ahead?
But David-
I said the polls have to be coherent. These polls are incoherent.
But your baseline and the fact from which you
They are,
argue...
they're incoherent.
No, David, please, let us consult. Let us not confuse and let us also not try to convince each other. Let us consult and agree on one thing. We agree on the point that we have read out our numbers to you. Samuel does not have 2 sets of numbers, so he can't compare. But I have read out to you, and I send you these numbers every time because I send them out to both UDA guys and to Azimio guys, by the way. Everybody and media. Is that Raila has actually gained, but we have to look at it right now confined to what he has comparative to William Ruto.
Exactly.
We can't compare him to Uhuru Kenyatta.
Or to himself.
He's not running against Uhuru. He's not running against
I am not
Mwai
analyzing.
Kibaki.
I am not analyzing politics. I'm analyzing your polls.
Yes, but
and I'm asking, when I do analysis, I ask where are these numbers coming from? Any numbers. It doesn't matter whether they're anything. If you're modeling, if I read a journal article and I look at, I go through the model. I ask, are the results consistent with the methodology? That's what I'm doing. I'm asking, are the results consistent with the methodology? I couldn't be bothered. So I'm saying, if you look at the numbers, if Raila has 20, for example, in Mount Kenya, and you're saying Ruto has 60, so you're saying that the undecided is 20%. But in fact, when you look at their polls, the undecided is 8. Check your consistency. Go add up your numbers. See whether they add up. They are internally consistent. I put them in spreadsheets every time I get them. I don't want to say things here which discredit polls. I just want us to ensure that they are internally consistent. So I ask, what is driving these differences?
You know,
Yeah?
No, but you know they can't be the same because we are not talking to the same people.
No,
We are
no.
also not
I'm looking.
using-
When I'm taking the poll, I'm saying, if you're talking about, then I ask, okay, if Raila has gained is at 20. Okay?
In Central.
In Central.
Jeff, you must rescue
So,
Kenyan people.
where
Doc is
is-
about to confuse them.
You
must,
Cs.
you must,
And you're saying
you must
Ruto- and
rescue
you're
the
saying
Kenyan. the
Ruto
Kenyan-
is 60.
your viewers.
Yes.
Doc
Doc is,
Ruto is at 60.
Doc is losing.
Where is the 20?
Go on, Saitaba.
you know, Doc. I think you have to be fair to the viewers. You know, and you are almost even confusing me. You know, I know you may not be able to confuse Angie or, or Sam,
I'm not allowing myself.
but some of us are it's called what? Dyslexic. When you start talking
And I
about
will
numbers,
speak again.
when you start talking about numbers like that,
People answer questions
when you,
about the
talk, when you
numbers.
talk about numbers like that, lawyers don't like numbers. We like words. So let's go back to the words. You know, Jeff, these numbers, at the end of the day, the numbers are saying something. They are saying Raila Odinga is ahead, William Ruto is behind. Okay? You know, we don't agree also in absolute terms with the numbers. We don't agree with them. We know, you know, that the numbers themselves are not very reflective of the situation on the ground. You know, Daktari, I will ask him. You know, he was with us before he changed his mind.
Before Raila left us
He was with us.
And
He was with us before
and went to the system.
before he, you know, he decided to decamp.
Yes.
But he knows, like someone said, the server has never been opened, despite the fact that in 2017, Raila Odinga did not have Mount Kenya. The server is yet to be opened. Right now, you talk about a 30% increment for Raila Odinga and Martha Karua in central Kenya. I personally think, and we think that is a gross understatement in terms of the absolute numbers. It's grossly underrated. Yeah.
What number do you think it is?
Well, we believe, and we have reason to believe from our own polls and from our own research, that we are very close to evening it out with these guys. And by the 9th, which is 4 days, you know, from midnight, we will be very close to being even. And that just means, you know, even without an even, you know, like Murade once said, Raila Odinga won without Mount Kenya. We just denied him the win. Now with even 30%, 30% is a dream result for us. Anything beyond that is over the top, you know, and we believe we will do much better than 30%. We have done all scenarios, even with 15%. And there is no path to victory for William Ruto. There is no path to victory. We have done the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario for us is still bad for William Ruto. Worst case scenario, and I'm not talking politics now, I'm talking figures. I'm talking what Doc understands best. I'm talking research. The worst case scenario for Raila Odinga and Martha Karua is still bad for William Ruto. So you can imagine how good, or you know, how bad a good case scenario for Raila Odinga and Martha Karua is. That is a nightmare for these guys. You know, their nightmare is coming to be
In 5
on the 9th midnight. It will even before the turn of the hour.
Guys,
There will be a lot of weeping
Speaking of midnight,
in the wheelbarrows.
have to end.
Is it midnight?
It's almost midnight. Goodness, time does really fly. But thank you so much for crunching the numbers, folks. Angela, I will ask you that question off camera, okay? You promised to tell me off camera. You said off camera.
Jeff, let me just say this
Yes.
for Kenyans to understand, because I asked him earlier. Let me read out some interesting numbers for you. 14,000 plus candidates vying, right? Out of
I thought it was 18,000.
16,000.
16,000. 16,000.
1,000 plus.
Out of these, only
1,800
1,889 will go in.
Correct.
So come next week, Thursday, the people will be making money at hospitals because there'll be high blood pressure.
Lawyers.
Morgues na watu lawyers
Wakili.
na consultants kama sisi. Okay? But what should be clear to us is that I think Kenyans should see that here you have UDA, you have Azimio, you have independent pollsters. Sometimes we are told we are swayed. I've never met you.
Never.
True?
I've met
It is not. It is never going to be a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
It's not all no holds barred.
Winners and losers.
You go, you fight, you compete, but at the end of the day, shake hands and move on.
It's a match.
It's a match. It's like a football match.
It's a match.
So
It'll
You
end
don't
after
like
90
us,
minutes.
you move out.
yeah.
Or extra time or
It's
whatever.
Commonwealth Games, you know,
Correct.
you cheer your
exactly.
guys.
Exactly.
Let
But
the
if-
best man win.
Let the best win.
Absolutely.
Team win, absolutely. David Ndi, Angela Mbitho, Saitabo Ola Kanchori, Samuel Mudoka, thank you so much for your time and good luck.
Thank
All the
you.
very best. And just to remind you folks, a short while ago, Ferdinand Omanyala cleared the 100 meters. I tell you, he was smoking it all the way through in 10.02.
There he is.
There he is at the Commonwealth Games, and he got the gold for Kenya. Well done, Ferdinand. Well done, Kenya. Well done. And thank you so much for joining us on Jeff Koinange Live. Remember, 5 days to go before the general election. Actually, make that 4 days. It is midnight. 4 days to the general elections. Are you still undecided? If you are, it's time to decide. It's up to you, folks. It's up to you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good night. Good luck. God bless Kenya.
I hope